It's daring to go through those doors that are presented to us, that these things that have a twinkle in their eye, so to speak, that kind of call to us. And yeah, they're scary. There's something scary about it. I mean, maybe there's nothing necessarily scary about the unknown itself, but, we have lots of reasons why we make ourselves scared of that.
This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte.
Identifying your blocks and demystifying your struggles
so that you can claim your own path
and make your life a work of art.
Welcome to another episode of Way of the Artist. I have no idea what we're going to get into, but thank you for joining us. Evan and I had a nice little discussion leading up to this, and it's all kind of coming down to this idea that we're going to the place that we don't know where we're going. And there's something in that. And I think artists can really, whether you're an artist or not, I think you can really grab onto this and you can kind of ride this wave, and you can kind of see that there's sometimes, and a lot of the time, this thing that we're after is trying to get behind this force of nature that's taking us and embracing it and not resisting it. At the same time, you're totally out of control and it has you. The more you embrace it, you feel a sense of control and you feel a sense of like magic and sometimes other people see it too as they watch you do it, as they experience you do it, or they listen to you do it. And, that goes obviously for every type of artist, whether you're an actor, filmmaker, painter, musician, mime, it doesn't really matter. But there's something about letting go of the control, going into this scary ass place of the unknown and seeing whatever happens. And sometimes it's just incredible. And, we've had our stories, we've had our experiences. Anyway, we're going to try to get into this. We're going to venture into this rabbit hole. We'll see what happens. I don't know if you got something to add to that, Evan, but that's the best I could sum it up.
Yeah. I love this sort of thing that we're getting into. I think it's something that I understand the power and its implications more and more as time goes by, through my own experiences, through things that I see unfold both in other people and in myself. And I also think that in many ways, this is a great follow-up to like our last episode as well with Ted, because Ted touched on this too, talking about like, he mentioned people like Daniel Day-Lewis and Meryl Streep, and he's like, they step up there and they live in this unknown space. They confront this fear every single time they perform. And in many ways that's where something we might call artistry is, in that space somewhere, and so what is this? It's kind of a weird thing to try and talk about, because we talk about this unknown space. Like, how do you talk about the unknown space? Because it's unknown. And really, I don't know. I don't know how we're going to talk about this one. Like, I know we said a few things before we started recording, but I am excited for some of the things that we kind of were talking about and to see what else we might have to say, where this might go.
You don't know what's going to happen in the unknown. And that's kind of it's a weird thing to talk about, because in a lot of ways, I think with these talks, and one of our laws is the law of the unknown. We even included this in what we felt was like one of the laws of artistry, of the creative life, of pursuing this thing of finding your authentic voice and expression, right? And yet at the same time, it's the unknown. So like, what do you even say about it? But I think it's important for anyone out there to know that this very elusive thing exists. just knowing that alone, I think, is important. Going into that unknown, that scary place, I mean, the fact that there's somewhere that is unknown, and you know, I'm sure there's that thought of like, well, we've discovered so much, like we kind of can predict everything. Well, it's like, yeah, there's a certain amount of like, we can predict that this has a certain percentage of safety and a certain percentage of danger, right? So for example, if you're gonna like surf, right? There's a percentage of danger, there's a percentage of safety, depending on how well you ride that wave or how well you deal with the nature of the ocean or whatever body of water you're dealing with. And it's like, we kind of can understand that, but there's still something unknown. And the way that person will deal with that wave, the way they'll ride that wave, the way they'll experience it, there's a certain amount of predictability about where it's going to curl. You can look at a wave from the shore, but it's a different experience to be on it. And, I'm sure there's many other parallels that we could talk about, but art is a lot like that. And creativity is a lot like that, I think, where it's kind of like you're submitting to the nature of it and you're accepting that, okay, like when I get on this thing, it has me and I'm going to do what I can while it has me with it, but it is the thing, not me. Right. And I think the ego is always trying to convince you that you can predict it, that you can know it, that you can understand it, that you can control it. But the nature of art is unknown, and what's going to happen and those emotional responses that are going to come out of you and the way you're going to move your paintbrush when the moment actually comes and you're feeling that painting might be beyond what you think you're going to do. And that's the unknown. So we can talk about it, but we can't talk about what it is because we won't know that until you're there, and nor will you. And that's like the wild part of this whole conversation. It's going to be interesting.
And then try and explain what that experience was like when you were doing it. There's an element of creativity that refuses to be defined, that refuses to be contained. And, one of the things that led up into this conversation was like, we were talking a bit about emotion. And I think that emotion is one of these ways in which we do access that unknown space, because emotion is something that we cannot really control, and which is why I think that, our minds take over. We always try and keep a lid on our emotions, and and certainly, we need to be able to function and meet certain obligations in our society and that sort of thing. But our emotions contain this body of information and this body of creativity. I think, it's maybe I'm running off the rails here, but
well,
but
the emotion's kind of the wave. It's the nature. It's the thing that's inside of you. And I think that people think they can control emotion. I think that there is, in business and like presentation of life, there's state control. Like, I think that you can rile yourself up and get yourself excited. And I think you can start thinking about certain things and get yourself in a moody demeanor. Like, I think you can do that. Mm-hmm. But I'm talking about, and I think what you're referring to is this raw emotion when it comes out of you, and it is like a wild animal. It's where you're talking about something and all of a sudden you start breaking down crying, talking about it, and you don't know why, that you didn't know that was in you. And that, and to be able to go into that, because I think some people, I think they learn to basically keep things on an even keel for most of their lives. And they never even touch that until somebody passes away or something crazy happens.
Mm-hmm.
But artists, people who dive in the arts, I mean, I'm not talking about people that just want to be famous or somebody who just wants to like do it because they think it's cool or fun. I'm talking about people that really are looking into this. They will actively try to go into those places. And then we say, well, why don't you just do more work? Why don't you just do more of that? And I think, yeah, like, it's because like, well, you don't know what you're asking them to do. Like it's not that I don't know if they're necessarily scared of that thing, but it's to be out of control is scary in and of itself.
Yeah.
It goes against their human nature in a way.
Yeah. It has its own set of demands, and it's thrilling, like, because I mean, we come from acting backgrounds, and which is kind of an interesting place to come from for a discussion around emotion, because as actors, you are expected to have sort of an emotional life to bring, something that is believable, that is human. But, emotion isn't everything that's to that landscape. But there's something really interesting that you're putting together. It made me think of something that one of my teachers had shared with me, Larry, who I've brought up many times on this show. And one of the things that he instilled for everybody who was taking his class, because we were all learning how to teach what he was teaching as well. And when the whole thing of emotions came up, when we were dealing with like, okay, emotional preparation, like how do you walk into a scene with something going on, and one of the things that he continually said is like, we're not going for an emotional result. We're not trying to just have an emotion, sad, angry, joyful. The focus was always on meaning. The focus was always on discovering what really has meaning for you. And you begin to discover what really has meaning for you when it does something to you. Mm-hmm. When, you're out, waiting to go out on stage and you're imagining, some sort of circumstance potentially unfolding, in your own life, something that hasn't actually happened, but something that to just think about it just fills you with something, and you don't have any control over that. It's like you were saying, like when you start crying, like you're in front of a group of people and suddenly you just start crying. Like nobody really wants to do that unless you're maybe acting.
Yeah.
And because then everyone praises you. But if you're just, if you're at family dinner, and you just start crying, like nobody wants that to happen. Nobody plans for that sort of thing to happen, but it happens. Something overcomes and something takes you. And that something is something that has deep, deep meaning for you. And by meaning, I think that touches on something that is so profoundly true for you and your life and your experience. And when we're creating something, that's what we're trying to do in some way, is to connect to that level of meaning and truth within us where we don't necessarily have much choice in the matter. Like we're just kind of going along for the ride that this thing is presenting, and I think for the artist, the challenge is, well, how do you go to that place? How do you continually go to that place?
I think what you're pointing out to me is really making me realize that we got to get away from apathy. Got to get away from this place of it doesn't matter, I don't care, this is meaningless, like that, those types of things. I think all of that stuff is very like protective. I think like we do that kind of thing because that's how we keep an even keel. It's I'm not going to care. I think that you really like, it's hard to care. The older you get, the more you go through life, it's hard to care because so many things demand you to care, and so many things are so hard on that. And the older you get, at least in my experience, the more you see that things are not as black and white and as clear cut and as perfect or full of light as you would have hoped. Now, there are things that are, but a lot aren't. And I think what makes light so powerful is because there's so much darkness around it. And that might sound like a very negative thing to say, because I think that I just have to preface this. I think most people want to be good. And they want to be good because it feels good to be good. And for the most part, I think most people in their nature want to be good. It's just that it's so easy to be bad. And I think that people do bad things and justify those things as not bad because it helps them keep an even keel. Now, if they cared more, they wouldn't do the bad thing. If they cared more about how other people felt, if they had more empathy, if they considered more the effects of their actions and the impacts of what they do, they would care more and it would change, but it would be harder. And it's difficult to be empathic. It's difficult to care about causes. It's difficult to do this stuff because you start to see like how many people don't care about shit, don't care about the environment, don't care that certain people live in poverty, certain people aren't eating, don't care that they cheated on their spouse to get what they wanted, don't care that they screwed this person out of money or betrayed that friend. And people do this stuff and they have a justification for it. And you can look at them as bad, but that's also not caring. And I'm on a little rant here, Evan, but let me carry on. If you just look at the person that did the bad thing as bad in of themselves, then you're missing it. That's indifference as well. And here's the awareness I had. Someone in my life who so close to me, did something so fucking horrible. And I don't feel like they did it to me, but in a way they did it to me. And I was talking to some friends about it. And I was saying, it's like, I don't know how to deal with this thing that they did. And, this horrible thing, I don't know if I can forgive them. And then I was like, and I hate them for it. And I love them. And when I said I love them, I immediately just broke down. And I started to realize in that moment that this relationship is not black and white. This is a very deep and intricate relationship that's filled with all sorts of things. And that love, if I just exclude that, it's very easy. Oh yeah, they're an asshole. They did a terrible thing. They're a bad person. Fuck them, right? Out of my life. But when you throw the love in, when you throw the care, the fact that I bonded with this person, the fact that there's still feelings, it takes you into the unknown. It took me into the unknown. And in that moment, I remember the people I was talking to became extremely captivated with what came next, as did I, because none of us knew what was going to come next, including myself. And that's because I was in the unknown, making a discovery, finding out the nature of this relationship was so much more profound than this thing that they had done. And well, what do you do with that? I don't know. But my point is that when you recognize that you can care, you're going to find way more stuff. But if you have indifference, you can just stay out of the unknown. It's so easy. It's so safe. But also, doesn't that make you bad, right? In a way, because you're choosing not to care about something that honestly, like deep down, if you really face it, you do.
Yeah, and I think that you hit the nail on the head there, is that, like, yeah, we all know that person, and maybe in times in our life and certain moments and instances, we can be that person who's just like, oh, I don't care, it doesn't bother me, none of my business, blah, 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 and hey, look, I think everybody is guilty of that, and sometimes it's because we are actually just at a place where it's just like, we cannot look at that thing right now. But the thing is that if we continue going along this way more and more and more and more and more, those things add up, and suddenly there's all of these things that, like you said, like we care about them. We've been acting like we don't care, but there's this huge pool of things that we care about and mean something to us that have been neglected for all of this time. And I think that the further that we go along that way, in many ways, the more challenging it becomes to go into that space, to go into that unknown space of emotions and the things that we care about and the things that we mean. And like you said, love. I think love is such a huge part of this conversation, which I wasn't expecting.
It always seems to come back to love, though, doesn't it? Like,
it always does,
way.
Man.
Yeah.
It always does. But like, love gives the things their meaning. And there are people we love, there are things that we love, our passions. There's different ways that love manifests in our lives. I don't necessarily know where I was going with that, but I think that I like that you brought that into the conversation, because like I know, like, even recently we were talking, and it's just like, oh, holy shit, I have this pool of things that I've been avoiding, and I haven't been looking at this part of myself, and making the conscious decision to do it, and being taken into an unknown space. And there's all kinds of resistance to that, like there's this fear of being out of control. There's this fear of, it's like kind of like opening Pandora's box, it's just like, if I open this, what's going to come out? Like what, and we have all of these reasons why we don't want to go into that space, why we don't want to, we think that it's going to destroy us somehow. That might seem kind of dramatic to say, but very often, if you actually kind of follow your own mind down the rabbit hole, it's saying, it's like, you're gonna die. If you do this, I don't know how, but you will die.
Yeah.
And normally that's not the situation that happens, like you can go into that space and you can let it, whatever it is, flow through you. Let the emotion happen and take you to that space, because that unknown space can show you something, like it's like, yeah, it's new. You don't know what's going to be there, but so often there's beautiful wisdom. There's beautiful insight. There's it's that thing when you do have an emotional release, that moment of like breakdown where there's nothing you can do. All of your defenses have now failed you. And, the breakdown is coming. And in that breakdown, there's suddenly a clarity that comes out. There's suddenly some sort of thing that you walk away with that wasn't there before. And how did that thing happen? How did like, it's a bizarre thing that occurs. It's a mysterious thing that occurs. But in my experience, I don't know what it is, but I know that it is.
I mean, I'll go back to this point. I really think that not caring is the safe choice. If you want to live a safe and small life, care about very little. even yourself. I mean, just take as little care as you can into things. And to some degree, that's a very like safe way to live. Is it a fulfilling life? I don't know. I don't think so. And is it all that safe in the end? I don't know either.
Yeah.
But I know that in the moment,
when you said it.
I know in the moment it will feel safe. And I know because I remember there was a period in my life, and I remember it was in my 20s, because my childhood, my teenage years were so fucking hard. Like I got bullied. My parents were divorced. They used me against each other. I was neglected a lot. It sucked, and I had a lot of emotional hurt from that. Felt unloved, didn't feel good enough. And I remember there was this period, and I was in acting class, and I was just like, I just don't want to hurt anymore. I just want to feel good. I used to look around. I used to think like, man, like, and it's all projection. I'm just imagining what other people are feeling and thinking, but I'm just like, everyone else seems so like their parents fucking love them and give them attention and taught them how to throw a fucking baseball and like, or whatever. And I'm generalizing obviously, but this is my projection at the time. And it's like, I just want to feel good. I don't want to be hurting all the time. And I just taught myself to feel apathetic. I taught myself to not care. And it worked for a little bit. That was the problem. For a little while, it actually started to work. And I started to feel like, hey, I don't hurt so much. And I just started to not care. But I think the consequences of that decision become devastating over time. And there's a quote, and I don't know who the hell said it, but it's something like, it's hard to follow your dreams. It's a tragedy not to. And I feel like that's what apathy does, is it says, it's hard. It's hard. Let's stop it being hard. But there's a tragedy in that. And to follow your dreams to me means to care about something, and maybe your dream is a relationship, a family, maybe it's a job, maybe it's a certain career, maybe it's a role, maybe it's a painting. I don't know what it is, but like it's something you probably care deeply about and you want to find out. And maybe you want to excavate it from your soul. But if you decide that doesn't matter and you're not going to care about it, I mean, it's probably a lot safer. It's probably going to be a lot easier in certain ways. But will it be fulfilling? And will that come around in a way to be a tragedy? And that, I think, is the thing that drives me out of that. The idea that, yeah, if I do this, like, if I don't learn how to deal with the hurt that I feel, if I don't learn to like go into that, then it's just this thing I avoid for the rest of my life. And so I think what I hit was a point of, I tried that. For me, it didn't work. I don't know, maybe it works for other people, but all I can say is I hit a point where I said, fuck it. Because a friend of mine had died, and I realized that it could just all be over. And I just decided like, fuck it. This could all end tomorrow. This could all end today. So if I'm going to do anything in my life, I'm going to go out doing whatever it is that I love. And I just decided that, and I started doing that. And I found that as hard as some days were, it was so much better to be going into whatever that fear was, and I've told stories on this podcast of moments where like, and people ask me about this shit. But to me, it was like, I'm going to die doing what I love. And in the context of this conversation, I cared about something more than I cared about the consequences of it going wrong. And I think that's where it's like, you go into that place, you don't know where you're going, but you go there because it's better to go there than to stay in this known place. And I don't know if it works like that for everybody. I just know that for me, in a certain way, going to the unknown seemed like a better option than staying safe and apathetic.
I want to just like give a moment for like that story to just sort of settle.
Oh, thanks.
Because it's great.
Yeah.
It's a terrific life story. I've had the privilege of getting to hear you say it a few times. And it's always good. I want to, because there was a couple of things that kind of got this conversation as sort of the juices flowing for this conversation. And you sort of touched on it there, which was, we're trying to go to the place where we don't know where we're going. And it's not just being in the place where we don't know where we're going, because, that happens for each and every one of us in different moments of time. But to actually try to do that, to actually make that a goal of what we do, like that's what, I think, good artists are trying to do as much as possible. And again, for living a kind of a creative life, I think for leading a fulfilling life. And I think that it's actually, those things are almost synonymous with each other. A fulfilling life and a creative life are the same things. Ted was saying in our last episode, like when we asked him, where he thought creativity comes from. And he said, it's fundamental. I think that was what he said, fundamental or foundational.
Yeah, I think it was fundamental. It might have been foundational, but yeah.
Yeah. But it's fundamental in who and what we are as human beings is creative. We're just endlessly creative beings, whether you look at yourself that way or not. And so I think that there's trying to find this sort of connection, trying to find this thread of that is quite vital, because if this sort of unknown space and creativity and fulfillment and leading sort of our best lives are all connected, I think that this is of utmost importance for us to look at. And by us, I don't mean just you and me here having this conversation, but for anybody. For anybody who's living, who's got a pulse, who has breath in their lungs, like this is a hugely important question. And I guess in many ways, a lot of what this whole podcast is really about at its core, which is just like, how do we lead lives? How do we live to the best of what we have? Where do we go? What decisions do we make? And that nobody can answer those questions for us. And it's something that we have to answer for ourselves. And fuck, I think that we don't have many of the answers, for what that is. We kind of all come in with just mostly a bunch of questions. Yeah. With mostly just a bunch of questions, very few answers, and the answers seem to be shifting all the time. And so we're just we're just consumed by an unknown space. We're consumed by a place of not knowing where we're going. Like, holy shit, if any year has like taught the world and all of us that, it's 2020. Of how much we just don't know, how much we actually truly live in a space of we don't know where we're going. So what do we do with that?
Yeah.
How do we embrace that? How do we ride that wave? Because if that's just the way that things are, then we're going about this shit all backwards. In a way, like we're thinking our way through everything. We're trying to control everything. We're trying to manipulate everything. We're trying for something that we can never control, for something that we can never manipulate. Not really, not fundamentally. It's not something that we can actually do. So how do we live in that space? How do we exist in that space? And not just that, but like thrive, create, like use it, be a part of it.
Even if history repeats itself, the experience we're in is novel to us. And you can do all you want. You can go study history. You can study pandemics. And you know what? You'll find out that every 100 years there's a super fucking deadly one, and every 50 years there's a pretty ugly one, and every 25 years there's one that's really scary but actually is not as bad as we thought it would be. And you know what? We're in a 50-year one. We're in the one that's not super fucking deadly, but it's like right in the middle. And by the way, this happens every 50 to 100 years. So we could have saw it coming. We could have looked at history. We could have studied it and expected it and been like, well, it's probably going to happen eventually. But the thing is when it happens, you never know how it's going to happen and the way it's going to be and what it's going to be like. And we've had all sorts of movies about the zombie apocalypse and all sorts of shit like this. And everybody's got their guns and their, some, not everybody. I'm just making a joke here. Yeah, but people got their guns and they got their bunkers and they got all this food supplied away and they go, this is what it's going to be like and I'll be prepared. And by the way, you don't know what it's going to be like and you don't know what it's going to what's going to happen. And, and it's like there's this illusion that somehow we can predict and we're going to know what it's going to be like. And yes, you can look at history and you can see things repeat themselves. But when you're in it, it's novel to you. It's totally new. And I think this is the thing about the unknown. It's like, even though you knew it might have been coming, like, let's say you're in a marriage and you know you're going to get divorced. You just know it. You have a sense in your gut and you just know it's going to happen. You can talk to everyone about how they went through their divorce and what that's like. But when you get there, I'll guarantee it'll be novel to you. It'll be unique. It'll be its own thing. And I know I'm talking about some of the negative sides, but also the positives. The first time you get an acting role, or you paint that painting, or you write that script, or you get married, or you travel to Europe or Canada, or whatever the places that you go, you try something for the first time. It will be novel to you. And this is the unknown. That's the thing you can't describe. That's the thing. And that, when you start to look at that as more the point, then it becomes about living. It becomes more about being present. And like, I think I played with this whole idea for a long time and it was hell. But I played with this whole idea. What if I did this different? What if I didn't do that? And I tried it. I'd manufacture all these scenarios in my head about how it would have played out and how my life be better. And at the end of the day, I just realized like all of that's nonsense. In the moment, I made the choice I made. It was novel to me. And maybe I made the wrong choice. Maybe I didn't make the best one. Maybe in my mind now I can look at a better one. But at that moment, I did what I did. And now I'm here. And every time that I think we take ourselves away from this present moment and we go like try to relive the past or try to predict the future, we take away the moment that we're in. And by the way, there's going to be a moment, and I know this sounds like very off topic, but it really does matter. There's going to be a point where you're going to be dying. There's going to be a moment where you're going to start to realize my life is at its end, and it might come a second before you die, and it might become a year before you die, but you're going to be at that moment, and you're going to realize that these moments you could have been living. And that's what I think the unknown is. It's these moments, because we have no idea what this moment really is. And when we say we do and we try to control it and we try to like, you gotta let the nature of this moment be what it is and you ride it. It's doing you, you're not doing it, to bring it back, right? Mm-hmm. When I look back at the past and I try to rewrite it and try to say I would have done something else, I mean, that's like trying to say I'm surfing and the wave should have done something different. The wave did what it did and I responded to it. Now, the next wave I get, I'll respond better. respond with that information. But that wave, whatever wave I was on, is gone. And the wave that will come after the wave that I'm currently on, I have no idea what it will be like. Although I can say, well, it will be something like this, maybe. But then again, that's the thing, though. It's this balance of like, I'm here now, so I'm responding, and that's my control. But I didn't know I would be here now. Even if I felt it in my gut, even if I had a premonition, even if I can tell the future, you're still there in that moment. And you know this. I mean, you fucking teach Meisner acting, and I've done your class, and I know what it's like to be in the moment and be like, what the fuck is happening? I thought I knew what was going on. Clearly I don't. And yet, if you can just embrace that, something really fucking cool happens. And it's a shame. There's so many people who have had just from an acting side, who have had incredible performances from Meisner work that no one will ever see again because they weren't recorded. And the only tale that will ever be told were the people who experienced them, who either were acting in it or watching it, and they'll be gone. But this is kind of, as Ted was kind of talking about the whole idea of live performance, your life is live, and you're missing it.
Yeah. And does it ever really end?
Yeah.
Really,
I got some tangents today, Evan. I don't know what's going on.
It's great. It's great. I'm happy you have some tangents. I don't feel like I have a lot of tangents, so someone's got to talk here.
There we go.
I wanted to say that there was this historian. It was a documentary. I don't even remember what the documentary was about, and I don't remember the name of the person, but I remembered what they said. And they were like a historian from, I think, Yale or something, and like the head of history and of the history department in Yale. And he said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does have some patterns.
Yeah.
And I thought, like, yeah,
I've heard that one before. Yeah.
And I think that like that really kind of nailed that one, because it's just like, yeah, like every lifetime, every generation, is different, and there are similar, patterns. Some things kind of like rise and fall, and there's sort of a big sort of sweeping movement that can kind of occur, but it's always a little bit different for everybody that was there, and so you can't ever say that like, well, it's just repeated. It's the same thing. As well, it's not the same thing, because if everything was just the exact same thing all the time, we would know exactly what to do.
Well, can I say something? This is exactly what Ted was pointing out. You're doing Tennessee Williams in Missouri or wherever. You're doing it in New York. And it's different because it's the same play and it has patterns, but it's not the same. And that is the unknown. Like if you're really being truthfully authentic, the same words, the same story can be told, and yet it will be different. And people who have seen live theater understand, like they've seen really good theater live in different places, will understand. Even sometimes the same performance can be so transformed in a different way from the same actors doing the same play on a different night, that you can realize like, wow, like, and what is really false, and if we're just talking about theater, is when people are trying to make it last night's performance, when they're trying to make it the performance they think it should be. If they can let go of what they think it should be and what it was and be in it, something incredible can happen. And and not to judge this moment against the last or the one you thought it should be. That's very difficult. And I think that we can all relate to that. Anyone who's, especially in the arts, especially in acting. But yet that's kind of what we're asking you to do, and asking of ourselves, really. Can we let this be enough as it is right now? And then understanding that, like, what I think is truly profound is that each and every person was born into a life from a certain family in a certain place in the world with a certain family history, with a certain dialogue or dialect or a certain character to themselves, certain insecurities, certain confidences. And yet that thing is entirely unique and unknown. And the shame is that we don't see it that way. And I say this as much to anyone else as I say it to myself. It's like, because every once in a while I have a glimpse that there might actually be something that's very interesting and okay about me. But there's a lot of time where I'm like, you're not good enough. You can't do this. You know, you said that was stupid. That was a dumb thing you did or said, or, you know, but then every once in a while, like, you know, Ted had mentioned on last performance or last talk, I had a performance that he remembered, you know, that stood out with him. And like nearly a decade later, or like several years later, he still remembers that day. And so do I. And it's like that, you look at that and you go, well, isn't that kind of what we're trying to like live life like? And I mean, let alone what artists are trying to do with their art, but like, don't we want life to be that kind of thing where it's so rich and full that when you look back upon it, you're like, wow, like I did it. I lived, you know, and then it doesn't even matter. Like it becomes irrelevant if you won or lost, but you were there, you were living it, you know. It's so much better to have lived it than to have talked about the idea of maybe wishing you could, you know? And there's so much that we could talk about what we could live, you know? And I could go on and on about all these things that I don't know if will ever happen for me, but there's this life that I lived. And if I'm so focused on the stuff that I hope happens one day, I miss the stuff that I lived, you know? And I think that, I don't know, like what this conversation is really bringing out of me is just like those things that are the unknown. You don't know what they are when they're happening, but then they are often so memorable and so important. But you have to be willing to go into that unknown. You have to be willing to ride that wave and see where it takes you and see what it's going to be like. If you don't, I think that's the tragedy of not living your dream. You just end up with these blasé moments that all just kind of mesh into each other and they don't matter.
You know what's interesting? I'm just all over the place with quotes. I might have to search this one up, but you just reminded me of this one quote, which was, we think in abstractions, but we live in detail. We live in the details. We live in the specifics. And this conversation has been so interesting because it's gone down these different avenues and these different paths. And it's like, is this related to where we even started to? And it's like, and it all is in a very kind of interesting way. But that quote just jumped into my head because it's like, yeah, like so much of us are living from the neck up. You know, that's how we're living our lives, and we're shut off from our bodies. We're shut off from our emotions, and we're living in our heads. So where are we living? We're living in a world of abstractions. We're living in a world of just, you know, of block lettering, you know, and pixelated images, you know, and it's like, but we live in details and colors and things. Like it's, you know, most people can probably trace a couple of memories, you know, of just like of, you know, one of the best days or afternoons, or, you know, just a beautiful moment in your life. You know, if you just think about a beautiful moment in your life, take a look to see just how much of that you didn't know was going to happen. How much of that was just like, this is just what happened, and I was there. Like, and I was just so there for it. I mean, I use traveling as an example of this, and why so many people, I understand why so many people love to travel, because it puts you into that space. That's one of, it's kind of an interesting way where I think people, whether they know it or not, that people experience the unknown. You're going to another country, to a place you don't know, to a place where maybe they don't speak the same language as you. You know, they eat different food than, you know, like there's all of this shit where you're like, and you throw yourself in there and it's like, respond, you know, just, and the only way that you can do that is by becoming so attentive to where you are, becoming so attentive to what you're doing and what's around you, you know, that, and there's so much joy that comes with that, you know, like some of my fondest memories are of traveling, you know, because it's like, you just kind of have to bypass that whole circuit in your brain. Cause you're like, I honestly don't know, you know, you have to just respond, because that's in some ways the only way that you're going to survive. But it has this weird extra benefit of kind of bringing magic in, you know, there's just sort of this magic that suddenly occurs. Like, you know, the sun is shining brighter and the colors are more vivid and the food tastes better. It's just like it. And I'm just trying to use this as an example of for people to understand how this has an impact and why and potentially where we can find more of this stuff in our lives and I don't know, Brandon. I don't know. I'm at a loss for words today.
Yeah. Oh, you don't have to, you know. You don't have to know. I think that's the thing. But I think that I relate. I mean, travel has been one of those things for me too. It's been one of those things that, you know, I don't have any regrets. I feel like I made the choices I made, and I've made peace with those choices. But if there was anything that I would tell anybody from the choices I made, just to say, hey, go travel more than you think you should. Go travel more, because travel is going to teach you a lot of the things that you need to learn. And I'm talking about everything. Like, it's going to teach you about like art. It's going to teach you about yourself. It's going to teach you about people, you know. Travel more, put yourself, because travel puts you into a place of, and don't go to the safe place. Don't go to the resort. Don't go do the thing that you already know. Go do the thing that you don't know. You know, travel has taught me so much about, like, it just broke down certain restrictions I had built in my mind, you know, and it you know, there's so many times, and I don't know, there's so many times where I've traveled and I've personally gone and done things where I didn't have the money or I didn't have the connection or the resource, and I just said, I'll figure it out when I get there. And in some ways, I feel like that type of travel is the most rewarding travel, because you really find out how resourceful you are. You find out what's possible. And I like to think, and I mean, look, you don't have to agree with me, but I like to think that, you know, you're designed to succeed on this planet. You are of this planet. You are of this nature, you know. This is designed to make you strong. This is designed to give you everything you need. I mean, the harder the wind blows, the more the tree plants its roots in the ground, man. So you get wind, you're planting your roots. You know what I mean? Like, it's designed to fucking make you what you are. So the more that you embrace that and stop fighting that, the more you're going to find out, like, it's just in your nature to survive in the unknown. And like humanity has lived for so fucking long for us to get here, for us to figure out how to be here now. I mean, you're riding on the shoulders of so many giants, giants that aren't just who wrote books and led things, but, you know, people who just were like animals that figured out how to survive against fucking wild cats and shit. You know what I mean? Like, like it's, you have things inside of you. You have fucking incredible things inside of you. You just don't know. And I think the unknown, when you get there, you start to find out what that shit is. You know, you start to find out what you're really made of. And yeah, sometimes we don't make it. Sometimes we do die. Sometimes we perish. Sometimes people climb Everest and they don't make it, and they don't come back down. But that's part of the human spirit, and that's part of the unknown. And I don't know why I'm talking so fucking inspirational today, but it's coming out of me. And I think the reason why, honestly, as I'm stopping to think about it, is I think I need to hear it. If because it's just reminding me, man, it's like, fuck, that's why I do any of this stuff, is to find out whatever that human spirit is. And that's only found in this unknown place. And I just had no idea what it was until I got there. And now I have these things. And, you know, for some strange reason, people come to me for coaching and mentorship. And I'm like, I don't know. But I have some things to share about that. Yeah. And people like that. And it inspires them. And it helps them make award-winning films and shit. And I was like, great. But I'm not... It's not that I necessarily know how to teach them how to do that. I just know that, like, if you go into this thing, there's something in there, I believe, that is fucking awesome. And a lot of what I try to do is just encourage people to go into that, because I just really honestly think it's a shame not to. Maybe that makes me somewhat motivational, inspirational, but I think that that's a lot because that's the way I learned to survive in my own life. Was I just said, like, look, you either submit to the life that you were given, or you go out and you try. And to be a kid who was bullied in high school and had like really no friends, to go and be the guy that was like, had a team of like 100 people and like became super charismatic, like to go from that to this was literally me just saying, fuck it. Let's see what happens if I try. You know what I mean? Because that was really like, you know, and don't get me wrong, I had all sorts of demons I battled as I went and took that journey. And I had, you know, days where I stayed in my room and I just remember staring at the shadows of my room and being upset. And those days will happen. I never planned for those days, but those days also made those days where I was standing on stage accepting an award or talking to hundreds of people really fucking cool too. And it's just, fuck, life is just a wild ride, or it can be a super safe, predictable thing. And I just think the wild ride is worth it. You know, I don't know why I feel like I keep needing to say that shit today, but I think I'm trying to get myself to remember that, because I feel like actually recently I've been playing it more safe than I normally would have. And and I'm remembering.
I think that safe is going to kick you a hell of a lot more than the unknown is.
I think so too.
I think the unknown is an invitation. And as we're going along here, you know, at the beginning of this conversation, I was wondering, I'm like, well, how do we even talk about the unknown? How do we even talk about entering into the unknown and how we do that? And as we're talking, I'm like, well, it's actually not particularly difficult at all. The opportunities for stepping into the unknown are absolutely everywhere. You got a passion to do something that you haven't done? Well, there you go. You know, walk through that door. That's the unknown. You've got, you know, someone that you want to, like, it goes through so much for life. Like, everything is unknown. There's a person, and that's where the life is. You know, is there that cute person who, you know, you see almost every day, who you want to go out with? Shit, open that door, walk through that door. You don't know. Like, it's like there's opportunities everywhere for us to step into that unknown space. And when the more we think about it, the more that gets our sort of our life juices going. You know, it's not in the safe spaces. It's not in, you know, just sort of sitting on the couch, so to speak. You know, it's daring to go through those doors that are presented to us, that these things that have a twinkle in their eye, so to speak, that kind of call to us. And yeah, they're scary. There's something scary about it. I mean, maybe there's nothing necessarily scary about the unknown itself, but, we have lots of reasons why we make ourselves scared of that.
Yeah, we do. We have lots of reasons why we do. Talking to the person that you like. I mean, I can remember so many times and like just my heart beating out of my chest thinking, I want to talk to this person, and overriding that and doing it instead of being like, nah, I won't. Nah. It's like that, those are the moments that like really transform you. And after you do it, I think I have to mention this because I think that, and this is something I'm battling with a little bit, and I'm realizing it. I think it's important to share, but you have your nature and you have your ego, and your ego doesn't like your nature because it can't control your nature. And your ego is the thing that says, your nature is the thing that says, I like that person and I want to get to know them. That's what your nature does. It's like, I want this thing. I want to know it. I want to talk to it. I want to whatever. And that might be your dream, a piece of art you want to paint, a movie you want to make, a role you want to take on. It doesn't matter. But your ego is going to come in and it's going to say, these are the risks. If we don't do it, we get to keep all this stuff. We get to protect this. And it's like, we talked about this. This is kind of I called it the guard. It's like the ego that's the guard. It's guarding whatever feels secure. And nature doesn't really care as much about what's secure. It's more into like what you're meant for. It's more like
possibility.
Yeah, exactly. The ego is like your guard, and it's constantly trying to protect you. And to override that is going to take you into the unknown. Now, here's the thing. If you go into the unknown and you find out you're not going to die and you're okay, and even especially if you find out you're better off going into that unknown than you were before, what happens is the guard, in my experience, starts to let up. It starts to be like, oh, okay, we're safe, cool. And then it just guards a new area further out, different boundaries. But initially, it doesn't even want you to do the small things. And what I find is like, if you push past the guard, if you want to call it that, what ends up happening is you're like, why was I ever scared of that? You know what I mean? Like, but you can't even remember anymore because it just seems so ludicrous to even be scared of it. But you're scared of something else. And it's just a little bit different now. It's just a little farther out. And what I'm finding right now is I have a guard that's coming up around certain things. And I'm like, what the fuck? But I'm realizing, I'm like, yeah, because it's trying to protect me from the unknown. The same thing that but it's more complex now. It's not as obvious. It's not just like, oh, go talk to this girl or go drive to LA or, it's not so simple and straightforward now. Now it's more complex. It's my boundaries, like driving to LA is like nothing to me. I've done it so many times, talking to a beautiful woman, it's not an issue for me. I've done that a lot. It's not an issue. But there are other things that I'm like, oh, I don't know if I could do that.
Yeah.
And that's where my ego comes up. And so I think like this is the benefit of pushing into the unknown. You push past what your ego thinks you're allowed to do, and you realize you can do more. And you start finding out that, hey, that's in your nature. And, maybe it doesn't work out, but if you can decide that you're going to, like, if you can look at it, like, not like your ego's bruised, but that you're okay. You went to ask out the person. They said no. They rejected you hard. But you went, hey, I did it. I did that thing that I wanted to do, and I didn't let it stop me. And you look at that as the win, then you're forever a champion. But if you look at like, oh, they rejected me, I'm a piece of shit. Well, then you're going to go and retreat and be small. And I just think it's in your nature to look at how you expand. It's your ego that makes it a pride thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh man.
we're
Yeah.
we're perhaps at that witching hour.
I agree. I agree.
Um,
It's funny. I know, like, I just want to say this. I didn't even know what we talked about, and I honestly didn't think I had anything to say. Actually, surprised that I've said as much as I did, because when we came to this conversation, I was like, I don't know what I'll say, but I'll just let Evan talk. And then I talked way more.
that's fine. That's fine. It became evident to me that at some point here that you had more to say on this than I did today, which was funny because I thought, I'm like, I think I got a lot to say about this, but I'm just like, I don't.
This is a great example of the unknown, right? You think you know what you're getting into, and then you just end up totally going into some other territory. And that's kind of the thing, though. Whether that's good or bad is irrelevant. It's just kind of like, but that's what you do. You try it out. You go out there and then you find out,
Yeah. Well, do you want to find out what I'm drinking?
I do. It's dark. What is this?
It is. This is the Steamworks Nitro Stout.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Is it like not bubbly? Is like
so it's not very bubbly, but it's rich. It's rich, man. It's like dessert.
Nice. Well, you're going to be surprised with what I went through, I think. Because you know how I'm always like, I don't like sours.
Yep.
Well, I got a sour. And here, furthermore, it's delicious. I love it.
Wow.
I know. Okay, so I've had 2 sours in my life, which I've been like, these are awesome beers. One was this cucumber sour. I have no idea who made it. It was a craft brewery in Vancouver, but it was incredible. And I'm actually kind of on the search to figure out what it was because it was awesome.
Yeah.
But this is the second one that I've had that I've been like, wow, this is really incredible. This is Moon Underwater, and it's called Peaches and Cream Sour. And it's really, really good. The thing I think I like about it is that, like, I think a lot of sours, the reason why I don't like them is they're super tart and they kind of like, they're almost like a punch in the teeth, Like it's just like too much.
You know what my problem with this sour is? It's too sour.
Yeah, it's too sour.
Real sour.
Yeah, this is sour, but it's kind of mild, and the peaches and cream flavor is just delicious. So, yeah, I highly recommend it. I think it's a great beer. I mean, actually, I think like if you're gonna get into sours, this is a great gateway, because I might actually try some more now because I avoid them like the plague. But I used to avoid IPAs, and now I like IPAs too. So who knows?
My God, who knows? It's a big, wonderful, wild world out there.
World. Yeah. All right, Evan, let's do final thoughts, my man.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, I think that my last thought on this, and I'm going to stay with the door theme because it's been one that's a good image for me recently, which is that there is this life. There is this you that you are, that you can be, that just lies outside of this open door. And you've just got to walk through it. You've got, like, that's what lies beyond that door. And there's going to be all sorts of reasons and distractions and, ways that you can convince yourself to not step through that door. But through that door is life itself, for you, whatever that looks like, because it's gonna, what that is for you is different than it is for anybody else. But you got to step through that door. You absolutely have to confront whatever it is that you have to confront. That's stopping you from stepping out that open door to this possibility that you don't know, and confront it. Just walk past it. go through the door.
I agree, and I love the analogy. My thought is really just to further that idea, which is that I really do think you must walk through that door. I agree. I think it's a shame not to. I think that there are doors you want to walk through. They're in your heart, they're in your nature, and nobody has to tell you what they are. I think you already know. I think I'm saying it right now, and you're thinking of it, and I'm talking to all our audience members. I think you're thinking of it, and you know what that door is, and you know what it is that you've been having a calling, and you got to walk through that door. And your bullshit, your guard is that, well, what if it doesn't work out? What if it's something? That's not the point. The point is that you walk through the door.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you got something out of this, if you feel it improved your life or your journey in any way, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, or share the episode.
You can also support us on Patreon, where we have tons of great bonuses. You are the ones that make the show possible and help us to thrive. Thank you for joining us.